January 20th, 2005. Started out as a pretty normal day. I was a high school senior. I was concerned with applying to schools and getting into college. I had gone to basketball practice. I was the manager of the boys varsity basketball team, and the coach had let us out of practice early that night so that we could go to the girls' basketball game. So I was on my way home to have dinner with my family and get ready for the game. I was hit by a drunk driver. He ran through an intersection and hit my car on my driver's side door. So when the car spun around and flipped 3 times, it landed on its roof in a ditch, and the glass shattered, and the airbag is what held me in place. I was held in place between my seatbelt and the airbag. I was transported to 3 different hospitals within the first 12 hours. The pain and emotion involved in the healing process is something that I'll never forget. I spent my spring break having surgery. I missed graduation practice. There were countless surgeries and procedures and hundreds of stitches and months of recovery time. I feel like my self-esteem plummeted. Every time I looked in the mirror, I saw pieces of glass and scars that were still lodged in my face, and I wouldn't go anywhere without makeup on. I constantly tried to cover it up and hide, and I was self-conscious. Instead of appreciating the fact that I was alive and I was able to walk and see, all I could think about was that I was the most unlucky person in the world. All I could think about was what I missed out on in days that I could never get back. I hated the man who hit me. He ruined my life and I hated him. I was filled with bitterness and resentment, and he ruined my life. He took things away from me that I felt I couldn't get back. I missed out on my senior year of high school, and every time I looked in the mirror, I saw scars and I saw pain and suffering, and I didn't think that I would ever be able to forgive him for that. I was voted prom queen that spring. It was a moment that most 18-year-old girls could dream of, and all I could think of was that people only voted for me because they felt sorry for me. And as I stood on stage, all I could think was if people could see my scars as every camera flashed. And I had applied for colleges for the fall, and I was scheduled to take SAT-2s the weekend after the accident. And I had to withdraw my applications for my top colleges that required those scores for admission. So that fall I attended my last choice school, which just caused the bitterness and resentment to increase. At the end of 2006, it was almost 2 years later, and I just knew that it was time for a change. I moved to North Carolina. I knew that I wanted to attend Hope, and I started going with a roommate of mine, and I didn't expect to feel as welcomed as I did. It wasn't long before I felt God was calling me to serve and to take a more active role. I surrounded myself with Christian friends, and I started asking questions, and I felt like that's when I started to grow spiritually. One of the series that I felt impacted me was the sermon series on forgiveness, and Pastor Mike had talked about how we were forgiven and what the power of forgiveness can do and how you can break free from that bondage. And I think I learned what forgiveness was and why you should forgive, but I still didn't feel like I should forgive the man who hit me. He didn't apologize and he didn't ask for forgiveness, and I didn't feel like he deserved it. I didn't want a relationship with him in the future, so I didn't think that it really applied to me. I didn't think that of the people in my life that he was the one that I should forgive. That sermon series really made me realize the burden that I was carrying, and that the bitterness and resentment that I was holding in was weighing me down, and it wasn't affecting him, it wasn't hurting him, it was hurting me, and it was holding me back from making lasting relationships. I felt a huge change in myself after that series, and I remember telling a friend of mine that I had to start praying while I was in the shower because I would cry every time, and I started to realize the power of prayer. And through all of that, I felt like it was God's way of saying, I've got this, just trust me and just put your faith in me. And feel like He wanted me to stop looking back and to start moving forward, and the power of prayer was one of the ways that I felt like I could do that. And instead of hating the man who hit me, I started to pray for him. And I feel like the power of forgiveness and the power of prayer together is what made me transform. I felt like my walk in faith started on the day of the accident. I just didn't know it at the time. And that's why I wanted to be baptized on January 20th. I was able to share my story with the church at Sunday at 5, and after that everyone kept telling me how brave I was and thanking me, and I just hoped that I could reach someone with my story and that people would understand what the power of forgiveness can do. Every time I looked in the mirror, I saw scars and pieces of glass that were still lodged in my face, and it was daily reminders of pain and suffering and days that I could never get back. And today the scars are still there and the pieces of glass are still lodged in my face, but today they're daily reminders of love and healing and forgiveness.